Hey guys, welcome back to Mini Urban Farm, a channel about gardening and homesteading in the suburbs. I just finished filling up this raised bed in the process that I'm going to take you through during this video, and I was able to do it for 33% of the price that I normally would have done if I went to the box store, if I went to the gardening center and I got raised bed mix or soil mix or potting mix or any of those things. 33%, that is a whole bunch of plants, you guys. So stay to the end. I will run through the exact breakdown, how much soil I needed, how many bags I used of the stuff that I actually did end up purchasing, and the total amount that I was able to save. Today I'm going to be filling up two garden beds that I just got. They are 2 feet by 8 feet by 17 inches. So that is quite a bit of soil. In order to avoid having to spend a ton of money on soil, I'm going to be using materials like tree branches and other brush. I'll walk you through the entire material list, but basically we're doing this for super cheap. Okay, so for this project we are using peat moss. You can use cocoa coir or peat moss. I always just use peat moss, and our cow manure. This stuff is like, I think $2 a bag at Home Depot where I got it. This I think is $11 a bag. Now I do have quite a bit of this and the compost. I hope that we're not going to need all of it, because in addition to those things, which are the only things I would normally use, today we are adding in a whole bunch of sticks, like you can see here, and pine cones and leaves and just stuff that we found around the property. Now, if you guys are not familiar with this channel, we currently bought a 2-acre lot, which we are currently building on. So we have cleared out an entire section for the house, and this garden is going to be going away after that. Of course, Milo's super fond of this garden, but we are going to be building a whole new garden once that house is actually built. Which means that we were able to use a whole bunch of these logs. This is just some pine and some oak and, you know, random logs. This is actually stuff that we had cut for firewood a while ago and never ended up using, probably because it's 100 degrees here usually during the summer. And of course we have some cardboard over there for the bottom of our raised bed. So now for the fun part, to assemble everything. The first thing you're going to want to put down is a layer of cardboard. This can be any cardboard you have laying around. Amazon boxes, boxes from the store. I like to use my wine club boxes because they're pretty big and they cover a lot of ground. But the main thing is to ensure that they don't have any tape or shiny print on them. You want just bare cardboard. Place them directly on the ground to cover as much space as you can, overlapping them as you go. And it's okay if you don't cover everything. Just try to cover most of it till the edges of the raised bed. Next up, it's time to add in your logs. Now these logs, I just had cut them up already, so I added them in just like this. You can use ones that are bigger or smaller, but you do want to get a pretty good amount of logs in here. If I had more to add, I would have definitely added more, and you can add this up until about 1/3 of the raised bed. You can see there are still some gaps in mine because I didn't have as many to add in here, but feel free to add in more if you have them. Alright, so now it is time for our leaves. After you've filled the bottom of the bed with the thicker stuff, you're going to come in here, and any twigs, any leaves, I have some dried pine needles in here, there's some pine cones, anything, even some like sawdust I think from when they were chipping some of the trees, and some soil, anything that you're able to grab. You can use grass clippings for this. Just make sure that whatever you're using, grass clippings or, you know, plant material, whatever it is, was not sprayed with any kind of pesticides. I know that this wasn't, so it is good to go. I have 4 bags total, 3 over here, and then another one on the far side of the garden. As you can see, I have another raised garden bed over there that I'm going to be filling up. And so 2 are going in here, 2 are going in the other one, and then we shall get to the rest of it. Okay, so we're gonna add in our branches, our leaves, our pine cones, any sawdust, any of that, even some dirt that I scraped up from the floor. But essentially we're just gonna create a nice little even layer on top of our logs. It doesn't have to be anything perfect, just this is gonna be the middle portion of our raised bed. Just make sure that it's mostly smooth so that there's nothing poking up at you through the soil when you're gardening. So for our next step, we are adding in our layer of peat moss. I'm adding in 2 bags, and that seemed to work pretty well for one of these raised garden beds. Again, they're 2 feet by 8 feet by 17 inches, and we have that layer of wood, and we have like all that brush and pine needles and stuff like that also on the bottom of them. You don't need to compact it down too much since we're going to be mixing it with our compost after this, but you do want to make sure that it is in between all of like the little nooks and spaces and crannies that we already put in there for our previous layers. Alright, so you can see with the 2 bags of peat moss, this is mostly filled. You can definitely use less of this if you want to have the bed not come all the way to the top. This is probably a good 6 inches or so from the top of the bed. I still have compost to add in here, so I know that my compost layer is going to fill it up. I like it all the way to the top of the bed, but if you want it to be not all the way filled to the top, then you can totally just use less peat moss. Now we're going to do the same thing and go ahead and add our compost on top of our peat moss. For this garden bed, I used 4 bags total of the cow manure compost. After that, you're going to want to just go ahead and mix it in. I use a trowel and my hands mostly, but after a while it just gets a little bit easier to start digging and mixing it by hand. Alright, so I filled up my raised bed, and basically I was able to fill this bed for $32 and change, which is really good. I used 2 bags of peat moss, and I used 4 organic cow manure compost things. Alright, so total that was $32. Now, I usually don't use bagged potting mix or raised bed mix because it gets very expensive. So the cheapest organic potting mix or raised bed mix I was able to find was actually $9 a bag, which I would have had to use 11.5 bags, give or take, and that would have been over $100. So instead of spending $100 to fill up one raised bed of this size, which is 2 feet by 8 feet by 17 inches, instead of spending $100 to fill up this raised bed, I spent $32 using the method I showed you in this video. If you like that, don't forget to like and subscribe. If you want the exact mix for my potting soil, which is very similar, but there's an added ingredient, I will leave that somewhere here on the screen, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.